It's another special edition of PFTPM. That's 3 this week, and this is only the third day of the week. It's Wednesday, and word has broken that, as expected, the Jets have their new head coach, 22nd coach in franchise history, Aaron Glenn, the Lions defensive coordinator, once upon a time a first-round pick of the New York Jets, now the head coach of said New York Jets. This is the guy the Jets wanted. We criticized them today for letting him get out of the building. If you want him, you got to get him. You don't want to give him a chance to go to New Orleans, have an in-person interview there, and the next thing you know, he's the coach of the Saints. And as I opined at the time, between working for the Saints and working for the Jets, based on everything we've seen about the Jets in recent months, I'd probably prefer the Saints. It's not an easy assignment to coach the Jets. A lot of scrutiny, a lot of criticism. The bar should be lower than it is. There's always this expectation they're going to wave a magic wand and they're going to have a winner. So you don't get the benefit of having a roster with holes. You don't get the benefit of being the latest guy to step into the shoes of a string of coaches who have failed. They expect you to thrive. They expect you to survive. They expect you to soar back to the postseason, even though they haven't been there since the 2010 season when Rex Ryan was the head coach. And Rex talks a hell of a game. Whether he's crapping on the Texans or boasting about his belief he'll be the next coach of the Jets all over again, it didn't work out. Glenn gets the gig, and we'll see where it goes from here. A general manager still needs to be hired. He'll need to hire the key coordinators, offensive, defensive, and special teams. I've seen some suggestion maybe Steve Wilks, who was very popular in Carolina as the defensive coordinator and the choice by some players of head coach. Didn't work out. He could be the defensive coordinator of the Jets. They got to figure out what to do about Aaron Rodgers. I'd be stunned if he's back, but I'm not stunned that it's Aaron Glenn. The wind was blowing in this direction, and as it relates to GM, a couple of names to watch: Lance Newmark, the Commander's assistant GM who used to be with the Lions, and Chris Spielman, who's an executive with the Lions, who I think has a lot to do with the turnaround of that franchise. He could decide, or he could be hired, then he'd have to decide, to be the GM of the New York Jets. And maybe a guy like Rick Spielman hangs around and helps Chris. Rick was involved in the search for coach and GM, Mike Tannenbaum as well. GM is the next priority for the Jets. But they have a coach in Aaron Glenn. I assume he won't be prioritizing his depth chart based on Madden ratings, although, when in Rome, maybe he will. One last point. Usually what we see teams do when they fire a coach, they look for someone who's the exact opposite. And there's some similarities between Glenn and Robert Saleh. Defensive coach who never coached before as a head coach, isn't a retread, isn't a guy that's been a head coach at any other level, and he walks to the head coaching job. And we know when a coordinator becomes a head coach, there's a learning curve, there's a flip of the coin, a roll of the dice that it's going to work out. It didn't work out with Saleh, and that might have had, something to do with ownership. We'll see if it works out with Glenn. We'll see if Woody Johnson stays out of it. That's the best advice. And I know the guy owns the team. He can be involved if he wants to be. The challenge, as Jason Garrett explains, for Aaron Glenn and the GM, you manage down and you manage up. You try to neutralize the excessive influence of ownership. If ownership has ideas from his teenage sons based on Madden ratings or whatever they read online, part of the challenge of doing the job right as the coach or GM is to convince the owner to set that aside and trust the process and rely on the people who have been hired to do the job, to do it to the best of their abilities and to the greatest extent possible, stay out of the way. That would be the best outcome for the Jets if Woody Johnson stays out of the way and lets Aaron Glenn and whoever is hired to be the GM do the job and try to lead this team back to the postseason and ultimately back to a place they haven't been since the 1969 season when they upset the Colts in Super Bowl III. Stay tuned for more special editions of PFTPM as the coaching carousel becomes a game of musical chairs. 3 seats are filled, 4 remain. We'll be tracking all of it at ProFootballTalk.com and right here on PFTPM. Have a great day. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.